My name is Christy Moscato. I am the Community Relations Manager for the Western region for Person-Centered Services. But most importantly, I am the parent of a now 18-year-old high school graduate. She graduated in January with her local diploma. So I had years of advocating throughout our school system for my daughter and have taught her, and I'm still teaching her how to advocate for herself, because that's, what all our goals hopefully are, that we're going to teach them by example and lead by example, and, just give them the skills and the tools that they need to be their own best advocate. But this presentation really is focusing on, you are the advocate of your child. You are the expert of your child. And we're going to be talking a lot about that. But at Person-Centered Services, we provide health home care coordination for over 18,000 people with intellectual and developmental disabilities throughout 18 counties, reaching throughout the Western New York, Finger Lakes, and Southern Tier regions. Our mission, vision, and core values are there on the screen. We connect people to the care, support, and opportunities that maximize their quality of life. With a vision, we're a community where all people lead fulfilling lives, and those core values of people, integrity, and trust. And I do want to mention that handouts I'll be mentioning tonight, and all of that will all be sent to you in a follow-up email that I'll be sending out first thing in the morning tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that email with the attachments, with the handouts I'll be talking about. This slide here just gives you a really good visual of where we are. We are in all of those green counties that you see there. So what we're going to talk about is what advocacy means, how you can make a difference, how to advocate in both a positive and collaborative way, because it is true, you do get more bees with honey, teaching your child to advocate for themselves, and how to be prepared for your meetings. That really helps with your confidence entering that meeting. But first, to just get us in the right mindset for some quick IEP or CSE, whatever you call your meetings, tips and tricks. This is just a brief little video to kind of get us in the mindset of what we're going to be talking about tonight. website. So it just gives you a little idea of what we're going to be talking about. But before we get started, it's really important to have some self-awareness about who we are, what type of communicator we are. We really want to understand our own learning style. So, are you a hammer? Are you a get the job done kind of person? Are you that cute little teddy bear with the bunny slippers where you're sensitive to everyone's feelings and you want to give everybody a hug at the end of the meeting? Are you that binoculars person? Do you see that big picture first? Or are you a magnifier where you're all about the details? There's pros and cons to each style, and to be honest, most of us are a combination of all four styles, but typically one of these styles, is the strongest style for you. So just be cognizant of that as you're entering a meeting, because we know when we're attending CSE meetings for our kids, it is an emotional time. So we really, if we have a good sense of who we are and which style of learner and communicator we are, that will really just help things as we get going. Now, there's all kinds of different meetings when we have a school age child, and Amy did let me know that Amy is, by the way, my counterpart, my partner in crime. She's the senior community relations and provider relations manager, and she's based out of Rochester. So she let me know we do have parents of an 8, 11, 14-year-old, and then we know about a 6-year-old, as well as a guardian for a 60-year-old sister, which a lot of these tips and tools and tricks will really even still be helpful for your sister when working, and working with the staff at the ARC and talking to them and advocating for her. But on the screen, you just see some types of school meetings that can happen for a child receiving special education services. This document here is one of my favorite documents. Prior to coming to Person-Centered Services, I worked for the Parent Network of Western New York, so I want to give them credit for who I've become, as far as being a great advocate, because they taught me years ago. But this document they created and we have rebranded for Person-Centered Services. But this is a document I used a lot, especially in elementary school. It's a 4-page document, which this will also be included in the handouts. But it really is a great way to let people know about your child, their strengths, their weaknesses, what are their management needs, what physical concerns are there, what medical conditions do they have, what are their their current interests, what are effective rewards, what are definite do nots for them. It really is a great tool that when my daughter was in elementary school, I had this document laminated with her picture on the front because to remind them that she's not just the name on that IEP, that she is, my child, and this is who she is. So this is a great tool. There is also a version that we are going to rebrand called About Me that is for, the kids in middle and high school that they can fill out about themselves, especially as they're learning to advocate for themselves. So be on the lookout for that coming in the future. But that About My Child document, I highly recommend using it and familiarizing yourself with it because it will really help the school and all the people who are touching our kids in school, whether it be the aide, whether it be the cafeteria staff, whether it be a bus driver, a gym teacher, whoever the person is that's touching our child, the bus driver. It's really a great tool to use. That's pretty easy to use, make copies of, laminate, stick a picture on it. But one of the most important things when you're attending a meeting or CSE or CPSE meeting is knowing the players. Who are the members and what are their roles? So, the Committee on Special Education, so the CSE, all those people are listed there. Parents of the child is on there first because next to your child themselves, you are the most important person at that committee meeting. Once your child starts to attend, I always feel they're the most important person in that, the most important person and member of that committee. Then you have a regular education teacher and a special education teacher. How many of you have been to a meeting where, the regular education teacher is a gym teacher? I think that happens more often than not in a lot of districts, and it may or may not even be your child's general education teacher or special education teacher based on their availability. But they have to have a regular education teacher and a special education teacher present at the meeting. The school psychologist will be there, the chairperson, which a lot of times represents both the school district and is knowledgeable about special education and the general ed curriculum. A lot of times the chairperson, from what I've seen in my experience in many districts, it's the psychologist. They wear that dual hat. The person who can interpret any instructional implications of evaluations. If there's medical complications, for your child, you could request that a school physician or the school nurse attend. Parent members, many of you, some of you with some older kids may remember years ago, parent members were mandated to be at Committee on Special Education meetings. And what that is it's a parent from your district who's not too far removed from the level your child's at. So if their child is a senior, chances are they would not be, attending elementary meetings, but they may be, attending any meetings throughout the elementary school or even in preschool. Now you can still request a parent member, and districts are required to still have a list of parent members that they can reach out to if a parent requests them. And a lot of times they're good because they are just like a fresh set of eyes and ears at that meeting. They can help you ask clarifying questions. They can help you, help look for that doe in the headlights look in your eyes if you're confused by something and you may not want to ask a clarifying question. That happens. So they can be a definite asset to that meeting. Other individuals with knowledge about the child, that can be anybody. That can be an aunt who takes care of them, grandma, a neighbor, a babysitter. That can really be anybody who has intimate knowledge about the child and about their needs. And then, when it's age appropriate, the student. My daughter started attending her meetings at her transitioning to middle school meetings, so 5th grade for us. She started attending her CSE meetings and then attended every one after that. Up until her last one, which was in December, where it was a student-led IEP. So, that's something to think about. Then we know there's subcommittees, and the rules are a little bit different with a subcommittee. So if you need to have a subcommittee meeting, there's not as many people required, but the list is right there for you to, take a look at. Again, that other individuals with knowledge about the child and student, if appropriate, I think are really important. I also think it's good to have somebody who can be your note taker, whether it is your spouse or, somebody else with knowledge about your child, because if you're anything like I was, especially in the earlier years, it's an emotional time when you're at these meetings. You're thinking we're always building our kids up and it's everything that they do so amazing, but these are the times where we really have to strip away that support and really talk about what their needs actually are, not what we want them to have, but what they actually need. So having somebody to take notes or to have, your questions all pre-written down, which we're going to be talking about, is really important. For preschool, a lot of the people are the same when it comes to, who would be attending the CPSE meeting. One thing that's different is you will have somebody from the county you reside in. So like I reside in Erie County. So somebody from Erie County attends the meeting as that county representative. So, and this also lists on here, like there could be lunch monitors, aides, bus drivers, nurse, the principal, anyone who comes into contact with your child may have some really good knowledge to support your child's needs. And they may see some things different than what the classroom teacher is seeing in that really structured setting. So just things to think about. But I always say to make sure you know your role, right? The great picture of Josh Allen there, but you need to remember that you are the quarterback of this team and the head coach of your child. I know it's kind of silly, but in the meeting, you're an equal member of that team. So I have had parents over the years say to me, well, what happens if I'm outvoted by my CSE? What happens if it was 3-2? That can't happen. That's not a thing. So, just remember that's why you're meeting, why you're having a CSE meeting, is to talk about what your child's needs and then to put that IEP, to start implementing it, to put pen to paper and figure out what the appropriate accommodations and modifications and appropriate goals are going to be for your child. But we also need to remember that we have our own roles as parents. the team, the full team, is expecting us as parents to provide information about our child, provide information about what's going on at home, understand what happens at school does affect what happens at home and vice versa. We want to listen when given feedback about what happens at school. Whose child is the same at home and at school, or at home and at grandma's, or at home and at the neighbors, right? They're completely different. You would think they're two different children at times. Sharing strategies for successes at home that might work well at school, or even sharing successes of things that have worked in previous years, maybe something a previous teacher has implemented that worked really well, that might not be a formal accommodation or modification, but it's something that could be discussed at the CSE meeting. And then sharing light bulb moments when you have realized something that really worked really well, or that worked really poorly. Just sharing those things with the team. And always remember, and this is a common theme with me, you are the expert on your child. Everybody is seeing a snapshot. Teachers, caregivers, care coordinators, doctors, nurses, they're all seeing snapshots of our children in one moment in time. You are the one constant in your child's life. So, remembering that, you're showing that you care by showing up at the meeting. So we want to work together to come up with solutions. So we want to have suggestions and ideas, prior to attending the meeting, or if we think of them at the meeting, sharing them with the full team while we're there.
Hey, Christy.
Yeah.
We got a question. So a parent
Sure.
asked, if we bring up something like wanting a one-on-one aid and are not able to get it, how do we move forward with that?
Well, I have a lot of documents about one-on-one aids that if you make sure that Amy knows, well, Amy will know in the chat who is asking that. I will email you some documents. One of the first things you want to ask when it comes to a one-to-one aid is, what is the barrier? What is the reason for saying no? It could be funding. It could be lack of staffing. It could be, a lot of different things. And some things are out of the committee's control. I do have a lot of documents. I have a lot of stuff I got from State Ed's website, and I have from Parent Network when I was there, about one-to-one aids, because they are harder and harder to get. There really has to be a significant need and documentation of need for a one-to-one aid. So those are going to be all things you're going to want in your arsenal walking into that meeting. And another big thing is, I'll say this later on during the training too, but one of the big things is always to remember as a parent, if you're not happy with how things are going, or you think that things are getting sidelined and you're just being talked over, table the meeting. You can table the meeting at any time that you are in that meeting and say, I want to regroup. I need to, gather some more information. I want some answers to these couple of questions that I've asked. And when we have all that information that we need, we can schedule another meeting. But remember that you have the right to table that meeting at any time and any point during the meeting. If they just hand you a fresh psychological eval that they've done, and you haven't had time to look it over, table the meeting, because you need to have time to read it, to absorb it, and to understand it. So I'll send you some documents on one-to-one aid. That is still, it was 13 years ago when I first started in this, and it is still to this day one of the hardest things to obtain in a lot of districts. And a lot of it is staffing and funding. I'll be honest with you. So I know I didn't fully answer it, but definitely table the meeting. Like that is one big takeaway on here, but I'll send you some documents from the state on one-to-one aids. So one of the big things we want to make sure we're doing is that we are prepared to walk into this meeting. Like we said, have your questions in order, have an IEP printed out with your notes on it. They should send you a draft prior if they didn't request one, and then write your notes and your thoughts right on that IEP in the section that you want to talk about it, so that when they get to that section of the IEP, you are ready right there. There's also something called an annotated IEP. That's in the handouts I'll be sending you. That is a really great tool, especially when you're new to the special education system and process, to learn what goes in which section. It's a black and white document, but in red, it has in the different sections what should go in that area. You want to have a list of questions, comments, and concerns ready, because again, Your emotions might take a hold of you during the meeting, whether it be happy, joy, sad, tears, anger, whatever. So having your thoughts down on paper prior to is really important. You want to make sure that it clearly states that these services are necessary for your child to receive an adequate level of educational progress, and that goes for the one-to-one aid as well. These are the CSE meeting and the IEP is for what your child needs. So really always thinking about that in the back of your head. And, we don't want to argue that services we're requesting are the best. I think what would be best for my child would be this. Well, I think what would be best for my child, or I feel my child would really benefit from, it should be my child needs this because of this. So have that, what the need is and why the need is there. One of the good things to do, for a child, and as you're getting to know your school team, is to build relationships with those teams. So there's another document I'll be sending you as well called What Works for You. Years ago, I worked with a group of families, and we talked about just shared ideas of what works with building relationships. So, we want to smile and be honest and assertive and be prepared by being organized. Not only being confident and being a good speaker, but being a good listener. Speak as we, not I want to see this happen. There's just a lot of different things on here. I talked about bringing the notes. Arrive a little bit early. You don't want to show up late. Try to maintain that emotional control. And I know that's easier said than done. I was not good at that skill in the first few years, but I got better with it as my daughter got older. And then when she started attending, I got really good. We want to try and stay on topic. If they're saying that, some accommodation or modification isn't going to work, ask, what did they try that didn't work? How did they try to implement that accommodation that it didn't work? And maybe you could brainstorm some different ideas. So there's other tips on that handout. But I'll be sending out. I know one mom had said once, be the muffin mom. She always went in with muffins or donut holes or something when she went to like a parent teacher conference, early in this school year. So just start thinking about ways you can build relationships with the members of that committee, not only the classroom teacher and the aide or the special ed staff in the classroom, but with that entire committee, because a psychologist, you may only hear from, once a year when you have your CSE meeting, if she's the chairperson, and then other than that, you're going to hear from her or him triannually, when they're up for their reeval. So, they may be a little bit harder to penetrate a relationship with them, but try and get creative and think about ways to build your relationships, because I've always said this, our kids are in these districts for a really long time. And, you do get more bees with honey. And I know I said that before, but it really is true. You don't want to show up day one at your very first meeting, guns a-blazing, unless it's warranted. So just always remember that. And we really want you to participate in that meeting. Ask questions, listen, be open, and smile. You want to be approachable. So now we're going to talk about what an advocate is. What's an advocate? The definition is advocates speak up for themselves or others to make things better. That's how it can be broadly defined. Everyone on here tonight has already been an advocate. You may not have attached that label to it, but it covers a really broad range of activities that just about everyone in many settings does every day. You advocate for yourselves and you advocate for your others. As a parent of a child with a disability, you've already had to speak on behalf of your child. You may have had to speak to the teacher, a daycare worker, a doctor, a nurse, other parents, relatives, friends. Though you already are an advocate. If you have a child with special needs, you've been advocating since the day they were born. And think about this. Have you ever met with a child's teacher about any issue, or spoke at a local gathering about a project, or told a cashier that an item wasn't bringing up correctly? All of those are advocacy skills. And you want to be an advocate because your experiences are valuable and can be used to improve things. When something is or isn't working at home, and maybe that can help the team wherever, whatever setting where the child is or your loved one is. You might have ideas on how to make things better, and you have that only long-term connection to the child. So, just always remember that you are that constant in their life. And as a parent, you want your child to belong and to participate in the community where he or she lives. And only you can make that happen. And that starts with learning to advocate, when they're young, and teaching them to advocate for themselves. So we're going to talk about the 6 skills, which are all listed here. We want to understand our child's disability, know who those key players are, know your rights and responsibilities, be organized, use clear and effective communication, and know how to resolve disagreements. So in other words, who's the star? Who are the players? What are the rules? What's my plan of action? What do I say when it's my turn? And what do we do when we disagree? And I say something kind of silly about disagreeing because we want to disagree without being disagreeable, if that makes sense. So the first step is understanding your child's disability. That will help you know which services are appropriate for your child. It will help you to have high expectations. It might help you to find the right assistive technology, accommodations, and modifications for your child. So what does high expectations mean for you? You should expect that you'll become a more effective advocate for your child. Expect that your child will participate in his or her own success. Expect that the schools, agencies, doctors, and others will partner with us. We want to have those high expectations. But we really need to start at square one and start at the basics, which really is understanding your child's disability. And there's many ways, and we're going to discuss it, that you can do that you can learn to do that. We talked a little bit about this, but knowing those key players, who's the director or decision maker? So when you're told that, you know what, you cannot get a one-to-one aid, who do you go to from there? Where do you go from there? After asking why, what is the reason? Who's the chairperson of the committee? You absolutely want to know who that chairperson is. What is the chain of command? We don't want to start at the superintendent. If our kiddos in elementary school, you start with the classroom teacher. If you don't get anywhere there, I would then go to my daughter's principal. A little bit different in the secondary levels. Typically, there's like a case manager or somebody who owns the IEP or 504 plan. That would be your first contact after the classroom teacher, maybe that you're having a challenge with. And how can you find a person's name and their role? If your child does have a case manager and they're in secondary school, so that middle or high school level, it should tell you right on the IEP who the case manager is. You should know that even prior to the school year beginning, once you have that IEP. Or it should be on the child's schedule as well when that comes out. And something I used to do to start building the relationships with the key players was before school started, as soon as I had the schedule, I would send an email to the counselor and all the teachers and asking for a brief meet and greet, not a full CSE meeting, but kind of an expectation setting meeting where we would all meet, and it would be her actual teachers, not just the gym teacher. It would be all the teachers, and we would have an expectation setting meeting. This is where I'm coming from. This is what I know my role is. I'd like to know what your policies and your procedures are, and my daughter would attend those because I wanted her to hear what their expectations were and that we were all going to work as a team together to help her get what she needed in school. So there's a lot of different ways. If you're in a smaller district, finding out the person's role is going to be a little bit easier. But knowing your rights and responsibilities. So NICEAD.gov has a lot of great tools and resources on it. So really, when you're really bored, go on their website and start digging around. You'll be surprised at what you can find doing a little bit of digging. Asking how a service is funded is really a great thing. There's a direct link between how an agency or service is funded and your rights and responsibilities. If agencies or services are funded by the public, they're required to follow certain laws, not just policies. Publicly funded systems are supported by taxes and include public schools. All levels of government, including cities and counties and all government agencies, are all part of those publicly funded systems. So, think about that. You could ask to see any policy in writing. And, you absolutely ask questions about how things are funded. Ask to see those policies. Don't ever stop asking questions, because there is no stupid question. You can join different family and caregiver groups to ask them how they've done it. There's a lot of different Facebook groups out there, but I always caution parents with, joining different groups and joining Facebook groups, because, there's that old, saying that, if something positive happens, you're going to tell two or three people, but when something negative happens, you're going to tell anybody and everybody who will listen. So, be cautious of, the different Facebook groups and the different advocacy groups that are out there, and the different support groups, because not everybody has the same experience. It is very person-centered, no pun intended. Your child is your child, and they have their own unique needs. So, remember that somebody else's experience isn't necessarily going to be your experience, whether it's positive or negative. So I always, just tell everybody to, proceed with caution in joining those groups. But it is a great way to be part as a team and to be with other people who get it. So, parents as partners, we can be partners. So oftentimes parents don't feel like partners, right? We feel like we're just players. But, understanding the different roles and backgrounds of each participant can help us work together. So, and work as partners. It can help us share goals, help if we share our goals and they'll share their goals. Staff people have their chosen careers, while most parents didn't know we would have a child with a disability, right? So, we'll be involved with your children for life, while most agency and district staff are only with them for that brief, period of time. They have formal training and usually receive payment, right? They get paid for their role. But we are there because we love our child. So, just remembering that we have our individual roles. We share that authority. Every one of us come to the table with different skills, but the hope is that we will solve problems together. That is our ultimate hope, that we are going to help this child be successful, and reach their goals and reach that full potential. And, if possible, exit high school with that local diploma, or, in a lot of cases, a regent's diploma or a credential, whatever that case may be, for our child. We all can solve problems together if we all work together. Becoming well organized. I'll be sharing at the end a slide with a QR code to our YouTube channel, and there is an archived, it's on both our website, I believe, and our YouTube channel, a binder training that I did last year that really is helpful. I think when you have a child with special needs, keeping all your documents current and keeping them in one safe place. So having a current binder with everything that you might need in the next couple of months, archiving the rest, putting things in. And I know so many families are probably laughing right now because they're saying they have a file cabinet with drawers, or they have banker boxes in the attic labeled, with the year. Now with the internet and technology the way it is, keep things in the cloud, keep things on a flash drive that you might not need right away, but keep that current binder with, all your phone log that you might have, the copies of that, who the school contacts are, the current IEP, the goal progression, letters that are sent out. If you have a meeting notebook, you could keep the current page in there. Any other ideas that you can think of can go into a binder. But being well organized is going to help you walk into these meetings confident. I promise you. I knew a parent years ago who wasn't feeling the most confident, but wanted to pretend she was. And she walked into the school with the part 200 of the regs, which is the special ed. It's part 200 of the New York State Education Department regulations, all around special education. And it's a really lengthy read if you're ever really bored and have insomnia. But she went in there with it pigeon-eared and post-it notes sticking out of the pages. So it looked like she had, dog-eared so many of these pages that she really knew what she was talking about. I know a couple of people who took her lead on that one, but it was a way, because you want to walk into that meeting with confidence. And, by doing all these steps and preparing yourself and understanding your child's disability is going to help you with that confidence. Step 5 is using clear and effective communication, keeping our eyes on the prize. The only person we have the power to change is ourselves. This is about us and our child, not them. So the way we talk to others has a direct relationship on how they interact with us and perhaps what services our child will receive. If you have a habit of showing strong emotions, you might want to ask yourself, will this get my child what they need today as well as tomorrow? That power we talked about earlier, it's not the same as aggression. If you behave with anger, others are likely going to only remember that you were that angry parent. You were that parent, not that you had good points or valid requests. So some tips that can really make a difference when advocating for your child is that the most important one, keep our eyes on the prize. And what's that prize? It's the effective service for our child with a disability. The focus should always be on the child's needs and not what we want or what we need. We want to listen and ask questions. Listening to others and asking any questions that we have of them gives us the information we might need. We want to listen to see if the speaker is sharing opinions or facts. A fact should have data or records to back up what is being said. Decisions should be based on those facts. So when we're creating that IEP and coming up with the appropriate accommodations and modifications, they should be based on facts. Whether we agree or not, we really do want to try to understand what others are saying. To make sure, we understand, you might want to use those, what we've all learned at some point in our life, right? Those clarifying questions. I think I heard you say, yada, yada, yada. Is that correct? Or tell me more so I'm sure I understand your point of view. Or please explain that to me in another way so I'm sure I understand. That can take you a really far way, just asking those clarifying questions. We want to, like I said in the previous slide, we want to problem solve together to find solutions. We want to make sure we're speaking clearly and slowly. We want to avoid trying to make people feel defensive and try to turn those negatives into a positive. And then summarizing. Summarizing even in an email follow-up, I think is really helpful. It's documentation of what you understood walking out of that meeting. And B, I think it's good for you to really make sure that you are fully, remembering everything correctly, especially if you don't have a note taker or somebody there listening with you. That's a great way, is to summarize at the end of the meeting and then again in a follow-up email to the team. Can be really, really helpful. So, remembering that previous slide, good communication tips, we want to focus on our goal. And the goal is what our child needs. We want to show respect, but we absolutely should expect it from others. We want to do our best to manage those emotions, which again is not always easy. Asking those questions, rephrasing for clarification, and saying thank you. Now, I mentioned sending a follow-up letter or, letter, or I don't write letters anymore. I don't know if you do, but when we're sending an email or sending a follow-up letter, a lot of times putting it in writing is really crucial. So as we stated before, years ago, you may have heard, I'm older, so I know I always heard this: if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. So letters might be sent for a variety of reasons, such as making a request, sending that summarizing, MOU that this is my understanding when we left the meeting. Clarifying what you yourself want to say. If you're asking for a final decision be made, say about that one-to-one aid, put it in writing. If you want to say thank you, if you want to document a verbal discussion, but you want to make sure you sent that letter to the person who can make the change. We want to make sure it is dated with the year and signed. I know time and time again, I would see letters families would write and they would not have the year. So you want to make sure that the year is on there and that you sign it. We want to focus on one or two of the big issues. We don't want to list 10 things in one letter because, if you're anything like me, you might read the first couple of points and then you're going to get blurry-eyed and you're not going to finish reading the letter or the email. So, focusing on those one or two bigger issues. Letters should not be more than 1 page. And if a reply is requested, we want to make sure we put a deadline in there. I expect to hear from you by May 1st, 2025, with your response. Make sure to give your contact information anywhere and everywhere you can be contacted, so you don't hear, well, I tried to contact you, but you didn't respond, or I sent an email to this email. Should I have sent it to another email? So just making sure your the best contact information is there for you. But most importantly, you want to make sure you keep a copy for yourself. If you are hand delivering anything to the school or to the district office for any reason, always ask that they make a copy of it and they stamp it received with their name, the date, and the time that it was received. That is really important. If you are requesting updated evaluations and you put it in writing and you deliver it to the district office, make sure that you get it, a copy of it, or even just the front page with that stamp on it, or marked that it was received by Jane Smith, on May 1st, 2025 at 9:42 a.m. Whatever. That can come in handy later if we have disagreements and, things need to be challenged, especially. So now I talked about this, disagreeing without being disagreeable, right? When parents and agencies or service providers disagrees, there are things that you can do or say that can help the disagreement be solved more quickly and amicably, no matter which process is used. So, that disagreeing without being disagreeable, we want to express that you want to continue to work together for the benefit of your child and that you do not want this agreement to interfere with that, or this disagreement to interfere with that. Sometimes we might be partly responsible, right? Did we come in with our emotions too much on our sleeve? Did we come in because we had a bad experience at the previous meeting and we came in with all those same emotions? Who knows? But we need to own that if we are, and apologize if it's appropriate. Remembering that we're the advocate for our child only, right? The people who are at this meeting, they may disagree with us. They don't work for us. They don't work, they are involved in our child's life, but they are not the only reason for the disagreement typically. So, professionals you may disagree with work for the agency or the service provider. They must not only answer to you, but they also have to answer to the district or the agency. So we always do need to remember that. And sometimes that's easier said than done. Oftentimes it's not the person that we're disagreeing with at all, but it's the policy, it's the district, or it's the agency. So if that 1-to-1 aid, and I apologize, I'm going to keep going back there because it's fresh in my head. If that 1-to-1 aid, if it, comes to the point that 1-to-1 aid is not something that's possible, we need to think about all these things, that it's not the person telling you no necessarily. It could be the policy, it could be the district. That's why asking why it's being denied, what the reasons are, is really important. We need to remember that no one has all the answers. Nobody does. Hopefully, if they don't have the answers, they're going to get you the answers. And that's where that email follow up. So I hope to hear from you. I expect to hear from you by May 1st or whatever, because we need to give people time to get the answers if they don't have them. We want to make sure all our facts are correct, especially when we're talking timelines of things. So that's where that having a binder or keeping a communication log can really come in handy, because we have everything documented, or you have all the emails saved and printed in chronological order in your binder, so that you can, go back through those pages and see that you are correct, you are remembering correctly. Especially then if you send that follow-up email with what your understanding was leaving that meeting, you have that in writing as well, especially when they respond and say, yes, that's exactly how I understand it as well. We want to choose our battles because we want to ultimately win the war, and the war is our child getting out of school or going on to that next program or entering college or, graduating from this particular doctor's specialty. Our child's fulfillment and happiness and, reaching their full potential is the most important thing. And that is the war that we're trying to win. So, when it comes to trying to resolve disagreements, as a parent, we may agree or disagree with the decisions being made, but if we look back at that skill number 3, we'll be reminded that knowing who's in charge is sometimes not enough. We need to know the rules of the game, including how disagreements are settled with a specific agency, a specific district, a specific doctor or service provider. Each agency or service provider or district has formal or informal guidelines on how disagreements work. They each have their own set of procedures, their own forms, their own policies, and sometimes in certain situations, their own laws and regulations. You can ask if the agency has a dispute resolution procedure and ask where you can find it in writing. So there's a lot of ways to resolve disagreements. It's usually best to use informal means, right? Because like I said, our kids are in these districts a long time. So starting our efforts at the level closest to the problem is best case scenario. But talking to your if you have a care manager, your or a care coordinator, talking to the care coordinator, talking to the service provider, talking to that teacher, talking to anybody, at the base level is typically the best place to start. Oftentimes a compromise or a trial solution might work. What if we try this for 3 months and see if this accommodation proves to be successful for all involved? And if not, then we move on from there, or try it for 4 weeks or 6 weeks, but giving it long enough to show success or show that it's not working. I don't know, and even suggesting, I don't know if this would work, but could we consider or could we try, thinking of things like that. But when we get into, formal processes, there's, mediation, then you can file complaints, and then we can file appeals. So that mediation, agencies and service providers sometimes provide mediation where the parties who disagree, there's a neutral person involved that is going to help, mediate through these challenges, and they can help make the final decision. They'll guide the discussion and make sure that all their voices can be heard. If we're filing formal complaints, some agencies and service providers have a formal means of filing a grievance or complaint. So we need to find out what that process is and follow it. And we want it in writing. If we need to file an appeal, agencies and providers have a written process for filing an appeal. Government agencies have to have appeals process. In addition, if you're fighting over insurance, they also have an appeal process. If a claim or procedure was denied, if it doesn't work, you might ask, why bother to appeal or complain if it didn't work before? Because you could have a different outcome this time. So if something didn't work in the past, that doesn't mean you can't appeal it or file a grievance if needed, if it's really warranted. It could have been no before and it could be yes now, but it could also be the opposite. It could have been yes before and it could be no now for many different reasons. Amy, was there a question?
Yeah. Should there be somewhere we sign on an IEP for each school year, whether to agree or not to agree?
Well, they send you that formal IEP. They send you that document where, if you get that, when you first get that IEP, hang on, let me backtrack. When you first get that IEP in the mail, I am imploring all of you to put your glasses on, get your highlighter out, and start going through it to make sure everything you understood is in there. Check the attendance, check to make sure that the people's names are spelled correctly, to make sure that everybody who was at the meeting is listed, that people who weren't at the meeting are not listed, that your child's name is throughout. I can't tell you how many times I have seen proof of cutting and pasting when there's a strange child's name throughout my daughter's IEP. Even her exit summary that we just got, there was some other child's name in several parts of the exit summary, and I kept sending it back, highlighting all the errors, saying, please stop cutting and pasting. Let's please, this is about my daughter, and you're breaking FERPA by sending me this child's first and last name in this IEP. But I'm trying to think, because it's been a little bit, I'm trying to think if they send you the IEP, go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and that you have to sign. The district sends you something that it was approved by the Board of Ed, and before it goes to the Board of Ed to get that approval, you want to make sure that it's accurate, and you can absolutely ask everyone to sign it or let them know that you agree with it. I would let the chairperson know, yay or nay. But definitely read through it and check for accuracy and check for errors. Check for the most updated testing to be listed in it, not the testing from 3, 6, 9 years ago, that they're updating all of that in the IEP, because you're going to hang on to that last IEP from the previous year, but you're going to keep the current one current because it should have some different things on it, like different testing or different classroom observations or different goals, because the goals should not stay the same year after year. These goals should be attainable for our kids. We want our kids to be able to, have a low rung that they can reach. And then, so some macro goals need to be broken up into micro goals, and things like that. But definitely have the conversation with the district, but definitely look through that IEP. And if you find errors, let them know. And I have not been above when I've gotten nowhere with the school psychologist, which has happened. I have had to copy the director of special ed and the director of pupil services on my email replies after, like, when I got to like the third time of the incorrect IEP being sent to me.
The
So
follow-up comment, Christy, was because I keep being told if you don't agree, don't sign, but does not see a page to sign.
there isn't, and it's typically, it comes from the district. It comes from like the district office or the pupil services department will send something after the CSE meeting. So be on the lookout for that. But how can you find out more about all of this that we've been talking about, and about all the policies, and about agreeing and disagreeing and all of that? Reading websites. I'm telling you, you will find a wealth of information on the state ed website. Check the funding. If they tell you something is being denied because of a specific funding source, Google's your friend. Amy and I found that out earlier when I couldn't get the videos to play. We Googled it. Um, ask. If you don't get anywhere with the person you're asking, ask, well, who should I ask? Who will have the answers? That goes back to knowing the players, knowing who the decision makers are, knowing who has knowledge about this topic, and then join those groups and ask around. If your district has a SEPSA, which is a Special Ed Parent Teacher Student Association, join that. You can get a lot of information from parents who've been in the district, because there's typically veteran parents and new parents that are part of that SEPSA. More and more districts are starting even like informal SEPSAs. I know, because becoming a formal SEPSA is a process with the state and with the state Parent Teacher Student Association. So the statewide Parent Teacher Student Association. So some districts are even starting small informal SEPSAs that, is just a baby step, but it's a way to get like parents together to have these difficult conversations, and to have the conversations about what worked, what didn't work. Your child has Oh, wow, your child has autism. My child has autism. Who did you find was the best third grade teacher, at this building, at this elementary school? And because it can't hurt to request teachers. I know schools will tell you they can't guarantee it, but it can't hurt to request. But the last thing I want to show you real quick, and then we're going to zip through the last few slides, is this is he's a former superintendent now, but it was really some great feedback from a superintendent about working with parents.
Over the years, the most successful advocates, parent advocates that I've encountered, have been persistent, but they've also been collaborative about their willingness to work with those who are ultimately tasked with providing an education for kids. Collaboration really can get you much more than sort of manning the barricades and going to an immediate fight. It starts with the teacher in the classroom having a conversation around what your child needs, being willing to collaborate. If that doesn't work, going to a higher level, which can be the school principal, going to that person's superior, ultimately coming to the superintendent. I've always been impressed with parents, when I was a superintendent, with parents who made it to my office, because they all seem to have this persistence as part of the way they operated. They also connected with other parents, and so they sort of formed a bond. One of the most interesting things to me was a group of parents that once a month actually got together to talk about what were the common problems they were experiencing in their advocacy for their children. This was a very interesting learning curve for me, the power of parents talking with each other, and then in turn talking about how they could change the school system. And I felt over time that this was really valuable. So I think the most important takeaway is building those strengths around collaboration and partnering with other parents who also can be a resource for parents who are struggling with systems that aren't working. That becomes important.
I wish he was, I could have experienced him in person, but this understood.org website that I got this video from years ago is a great tool. Understood.org has a lot of great resources on it for you. I just quickly, I'll tell this 10-second story. This is my daughter Zoe back. This was in sixth grade in middle school. And I had to do a lot of advocating for her in elementary school because she just wasn't getting her needs met, particularly around math. She hated it, and it was because she didn't have the right accommodations for it. So we made a very difficult decision for her fifth grade year only to change elementary schools to one in our district that had a 12-1-1 math class that she could push into from her integrated co-teaching class just for math, and then go back to her ICT class. And by the end of sixth grade, this was her case manager, Rhonda Mills, who was amazing, who Zoe became a terrific kid in math. Rhonda was her math teacher. And Zoe started loving math, and even exiting high school in January, math maintained and continued to be her favorite subject. And it was because of the advocacy I did and the advocacy Zoe did on her own behalf that helped her to learn her love of math because she was getting the right supports. So the last couple of slides, I just want you to remember you are the expert on your child. The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. We have 2 more engagement series topics, this was an engagement series topic. We have supported decision-making as an alternative to guardianship in August, but there is actually another session of that happening tomorrow night. You can go to our website and find the link to register for that. That's an alternative to guardianship. That is the route my family is going down for my daughter. And then in November, we're going to be doing a bullying and youth with special needs. I unfortunately have a lot of personal experience with that with my daughter. So I will be teaching that as well. This is all my contact information, but you will all be getting a follow-up email that will have it all in there. This is the YouTube, the code to the YouTube channel where all our past presentations are, even some from years ago. I am sending you a PDF of the slides. There'll be 2 slides per page, so you'll be able to scan that QR code there as well. Obviously, we're on all the social media platforms. I'm going to leave this slide up here just because I know I truly appreciate, and I know Amy does as well, feedback, positive, negative, what could we do better, what worked, what didn't work, thoughts for future presentations. While we open it up for questions, I'm going to leave this up here and then I will close it out. If you don't get to it, that's okay. I will be sending the link with the handouts, the link to this survey when I send the handouts tomorrow morning. So with that, I just thank everybody. I'm going to stop sharing now. Just thank you for attending and